Everyone enjoys a good rags to riches tale, but how often have you heard of someone who went from having millions of dollars in wealth to living in poverty? That's precisely what happened to Anil Ambani, an Indian businessman. From the world's priciest sibling rivalry to jail bailout scandals to an astounding $7 billion debt, everything is connected. See how one man's wealth dropped from $42 billion to nothing. What makes Anil Ambani who he is, and how did he get to be so low? We must first go back in time to India in the middle of the 20th century in order to grasp this. On June 4, 1959, Anil was born in Mumbai, which was then known as Bombay. The youngest child of Dhirubhai Ambani, the creator of one of the world's most prominent corporations. Dhirubhai moved to Aden, Yemen, at the age of 17 from India to begin working as a clerk at the big commercial company Bess & Company. Here, he developed his accounting and trade skills and developed an interest in entrepreneurship. When Dhirubhai was ready to go solo, he went back to India in 1958 and began his own business trading spices. This company later became Reliance Commercial Corporation. Even though Dhirubhai and his spouse Kokilaban had already received tiny Anil back in India on April 19, 1957, they had already welcomed their first son Mukesh. The Ambanis were a young family residing in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Bholeshwar, Mumbai's Jai Hind estate. However, Dhirubhai's company was growing. He quickly entered the textile sector and adopted the business model of providing premium goods at a significantly reduced price compared to his rivals. This was a hazardous strategy that witnessed rapid corporate growth because it relied on huge volume sales to be profitable. The Ambani clan was soon able to relocate into a 6-story flat in Mumbai's Usha Kiran building thanks to Dhirubhai. Given his modest upbringing, Dhirubhai was adamant that his sons understood the importance of perseverance and would frequently plan family vacations with rewards. Anil subsequently recalled that, as a reward for their perseverance and hard work, he and his older brother would venture out on difficult 6-mile routes in the pouring rain and come back with a box of mangoes. However, we'll soon learn how well those attempts to imbue each of Dhirubhai's sons with economic acumen turned out. Reliance started to diversify into other sectors of the economy during the 1980s, one of which was the lucrative petrochemical sector. Reliance had grown from a single, small office in Bombay to a $122 million company by 1983. Profits were rolling in, so Dhirubhai bought a massive 14-story high-rise property in Mumbai's important business center, Cuff Parade, which became the official Ambani family residence. Anil and Mukesh, brothers, were always expected to work for the family business, and by the time they were in their mid-20s, they were both holding significant positions at Reliance Industries. Anil entered Reliance in 1983 as an executive interacting with business investors and the media, while Mukesh, who was only 24 years old at the time, joined in 1981 as a hands-on facilities manager. Even so, the roles were ideal for each individual. The more reserved, narrowly focused businessman Mukesh enjoyed spending his evenings at home with his 2 kids and wife Nita. Anil, on the other hand, was a little more showy, taking pleasure in hanging out with Mumbai's social elite, mingling with Bollywood stars and socialites, and earning himself the reputation of being somewhat of a playboy. Anil loved the spotlight, but Anil's passion of stardom proved to be problematic in more ways than one for Mukesh. Anil had a personal relationship with Bollywood actress Tina Moonim, but he also enjoyed socializing with members of the Bollywood Hall of Fame in order to forge stronger business ties. Love may be blind, but Anil's family wasn't when it came to Tina's line of work. For a conventional family like the Ambanis, being in the film business at the time was a little controversial, therefore Anil and Tina were quickly pushed to give up. But after much persuasion, Anil's parents reluctantly approved the marriage, and Anil and Tina were wed in February 1991. Anil didn't realize the storm that was approaching, even if he could have believed that this was the last significant argument he would have with his relatives. Reliance had expanded to a $15 billion company by 2002, but the Ambani family was set to face calamity. That July, Dhirubhai Ambani, at 69, passed away unexpectedly after a heart attack. With a net worth of $2.9 billion, Forbes listed Dhirubhai as the 138th richest man in the world at the time of his untimely death. The Ambanis were required to abide by the Hindu Succession Act at the time, which was a stringent inheritance law imposed by the Indian Parliament. A man's widow and children will inherit his personal property if he passes away without making a will, according to the Hindu Succession Act. The largest problem to be resolved in the Ambani situation was who was responsible for managing Reliance. Mukesh assumed the role of chairman of the family firm as the eldest, with Anil assuming the role of vice chairman. Although this could appear to be a reasonable solution to the succession issue, the two brothers weren't the same, and as soon as the power changed, tensions started to surface. Anil considered the two as equals, but Mukesh, being the oldest, considered himself as the only boss. Eventually, each brother began making significant business choices without first consulting the other. Sibling conflicts are frequent, particularly when it comes to competing for supremacy, but Reliance's significance in India's economy had grown to such an extent that action was required. Things grew so bad that, in vain, even India's finance minister attempted to intervene and reconcile these quarreling brothers. The most costly sibling rivalry in history would require more than a government official to end, and nobody was better qualified to do so than Mama Dearest, Kokilaben Ambani. But even with Kokilaben's best efforts to reason with her sons, the question of leadership persisted, and neither brother was willing to give up on the crucial subject of who would ultimately rule the Reliance empire. Kokilaben eventually managed to get the quarreling youngsters to agree on a resolution. There was to be two Reliances. Half owned by Anil, the other half by Mukesh. The brothers could agree on one thing: Reliance should remain a multi-industry corporation, notwithstanding their divergent opinions on who should be in charge. Mukesh took on Reliance Industries and Reliance Petrochemicals, two well-established, lucrative businesses whose primary line of business was the sale of gas. Reliance Communications and Reliance Power, two more recent, flashier enterprises that had a lot of potential for expansion, were the kinds of businesses that Anil wanted to take on. A brotherly truce that prohibited one brother from competing with the other's company for 10 years was part of the split. It also included the right of first refusal, which was another pact. If business shares were being sold, this gave each side the opportunity to acquire the other before any other potential buyers. Although the truce appeared to be a fantastic solution, in the end, it would lead to some of the biggest issues the brothers would ever have. In December 2005, following 3 years of negotiations, the Supreme Court of India approved and confirmed Reliance's separation. After being allowed to go their separate ways, the brothers each gave their different parts of the company a subtle branding. Anil's company became the Reliance Anil Dhirubhai Ambani Group, or Reliance ADA Group, whereas Mukesh called his enterprise Reliance Industries Limited. By 2006, both had become comfortable in their new positions as the heads of two of the largest companies in India. Even though they were still sharing the enormous family house of the Ambanis, they couldn't have been further apart. And they were both focused on being the most prosperous Ambani. Anil was a successful solo act in his early years. His first significant business initiative was in the telecommunications sector, where he created Reliance Communications, a low-cost mobile network operator, and effectively disrupted the market. Anil invested almost $2 billion on this project to secure 3G wireless signal technologies in order to stay up to date with the telecom sector's improvements. 3G technology was at its peak in the late 2000s, and Reliance Communications quickly rose to the top of the Indian mobile service rankings. Despite his achievement, Anil didn't pause to celebrate and moved on to the next. Anil bought the lucrative AdLabs Films and their chain of cinemas in 2005 and renamed it Reliance Media Works in an attempt to further solidify his hold. With more than 700 screens, Anil's multiplex operator became the biggest in India by 2008. Additionally, Anil established contacts in Hollywood, and in 2008, he inked a $1.2 billion contract with American director Steven Spielberg to support the latter's production company DreamWorks. Because of his partnership with DreamWorks, Anil was able to profit from a number of critically and commercially successful films that you may be familiar with, such as Bridge of Spies, Lincoln, and War Horse. Reliance Media Works provided financial support for films in 2012 that were nominated for 11 Oscars, with Octavia Spencer's performance in The Help taking home the trophy. Anil hosted exclusive viewings of his Hollywood hits at his residence, attended by an impressive array of celebrities that encompassed the upper echelons of Mumbai society. That is, unless Mukesh is involved. Anil's prime years ended in 2008. When he listed Reliance Power shares for sale during an IPO, he created history in the Indian stock market. By the time the company ended, 10.6 times as many shares as there were on the market were snapped up, for a total of $3 billion, in just 60 seconds. Anil's financial achievements culminated with his inclusion as the sixth richest person in the world on Forbes' 2008 list of billionaires, with an incredible $42 billion in wealth. However, even this achievement was insufficient. And Anil continued to feel underappreciated by his elder brother, who was $1 billion richer and ranked number 5, only a step ahead of him. Little did Anil know, however, that his jealous ambition was about to see him come crumbling down. When Anil realized that Reliance Communications, his mobile company, needed to generate more revenue in order to stay competitive, that's when his challenges truly began. In an attempt to stay up with the times and finance his ambitious ambitions for mega extension, Anil took out multiple large loans to support Reliance Communications. Anil's $2 billion expenditure in obtaining 3G capability is thought to have contributed around half of Reliance Communications' debt. There was hope, though, since Reliance Communications and MTN, a South African mobile operator, were at the moment in talks to merge the two businesses into one massive mobile merger. This was supposed to result in the creation of a significant international telecommunications company with a market valuation of over $70 billion, encompassing two expanding mobile markets in South Africa and India. Unfortunately, the plan fell through, primarily due to a member of Anil's familial clan. Do you recall the 2005 deal the brothers signed regarding the right of first refusal? According to that agreement, Mukesh would have first dibs on Reliance Communications shares in the case of a sale or merger. Due to a legal problem this raised, MTN was unable to finalize the contract, and in July 2008 it fell through. Anil's aspirations of finding a path out of debt were shattered. To make matters worse, Anil's managing director and two vice presidents were detained in April 2011 on suspicion of arranging to purchase inflated mobile network licenses for businesses that Reliance Communications had invested in order to falsely raise stock prices. It appeared that Anil would have to take out more loans in order to repay the ones he had previously taken out, amidst a sea of debt and scandal. Three Chinese banks, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, the China Development Bank, and the Exim Bank of China, awarded Anil yet another loan in 2012. By 2011, a staggering $1.2 billion had been secured by Anil from the three banks to assist in paying off the $7.19 billion in debt that had accumulated around Reliance Communications. As bad as things were going, the worst was still to come. In 2010, Anil started another bank-busting project when he borrowed $922 million from Exim Bank to construct a massive 780 megawatts power plant. Given that Mukesh had committed as a family to sell Anil's firms the gas required to build and fuel the endeavor at half the rate of government prices, this appeared like a workable approach to eventually generate a profit. The court maintained that gas rates should remain fixed in order to be equitable to the larger economy. Therefore, when building started, the government refused to accede to the brothers' prior agreement. Sadly for Anil and happily for Mukesh, this verdict would result in a double increase in Mukesh's gas revenues from building the power plant. Perceiving this as merely another ruse in their continuous conflict as siblings, Anil openly asserted during multiple news conferences in the late 2000s that Mukesh was utilizing all possible means to avoid fulfilling his contractual commitments. The highly visible power struggle did not help Anil's reputation, and several of Anil's companies saw a sharp decline in value on the stock exchange once the court decided in Mukesh's favor. Following the case's exhaustive proceedings, the brothers decided to renounce the non-competition agreement their mother had arranged for them back in 2005. In the revised agreement, Mukesh committed to delay his entry into the gas-based electricity generation company until April 2022. Nevertheless, the brothers were now free to vie for any other industrial positions that they each held. Mukesh has ambitions for one of Anil's industries as well. Things had begun to improve for Mukesh in a number of areas, even as his younger brother's situation declined. One of the biggest and most ornate private residences in the world, Mukesh moved into his own little paradise in Mumbai in 2012. A towering 27 floors and 568 feet high, constructed in 4 years at an astounding cost of $1.2 billion. You can't blame Anil for thinking Mukesh was rubbing his face in all this excess cash by creating such an extravagant residence. This opulent skyscraper residence, named Antilia, has 9 elaborately designed elevators and a 6-story, 168-car garage. Even with its very own 50-seat private movie theater, Antilia seemed to have too many options when it came to viewing drama on the big screen. Mukesh was prepared to perform a betrayal of his brother in real life. 6 years after the new arrangement that let the brothers compete, in September 2016, Mukesh made a big splash in the communications sector by launching Jio, his own mobile network. After providing affordable 4G mobile coverage, Jio swiftly amassed more than 150 million users, forcing other major competitors in the industry to catch up. Jio revolutionized the Indian telecom landscape, and with their massive debts, Anil's Reliance Communications was unable to stay up. Unbelievably, Anil's telecom company, which was once the biggest mobile company in India, lost approximately 98% of its worth in just 3 years. The precise reasons behind Mukesh's aggressive entry into his younger brother's business remain unclear, but Jio's prosperity was opening up yet another gap in Anil's finances. Anil got into even more problems after Mukesh's triumph in the telecom sector. When he was unable to make the $80 million debt repayments he owed to former partner and Swedish network provider Ericsson, they filed a lawsuit against him in 2016. The Indian Supreme Court then ordered him to pay the money back, plus interest, or face jail time. Only a few days remained before the deadline, when assistance from an unexpected source arrived. Struggling to avoid any link between the Ambani name and financial disaster, Mukesh realized he had to act and intervened with the necessary funds to prevent Anil from going bankrupt. Even though this could appear to be a gesture of brotherly affection, considering their financial dispute, Anil would have felt most humiliated to have his brother bail him out in this way. Anil realized his time in the telecom industry was limited. Following the Ericsson debacle, and Reliance Communications ultimately declared bankruptcy in February 2019. There were more lenders out there after Anil, as if things could get any worse. In the latter part of the 2010s, Anil was being chased by dozens of creditors, so anyone hoping to receive a piece of his shrinking fortune would have to get in line. The 3 Chinese banks that Anil still owed money to filed a lawsuit against him in 2019 on the grounds that he had given them a personal promise they would be paid back were the most important. Anil had only been able to pay back a small portion of the $1.2 billion he had borrowed, and the banks were chasing the remaining $717 million 7 years later. With an endless sea of debt looming over him, Anil Ambani has finally arrived at a point that would have appeared unattainable a mere 10 years ago. To the surprise of bystanders, Anil said on February 7, 2020, that his once dazzling $42 billion net worth from 2008 had suddenly dropped to nothing. Anil had genuinely gone from being a hero to a zero, and lost everything, in addition to his ongoing conflict with his brother and his tarnished reputation in the corporate world. Anil continued to live in a lavish home, owned a private plane, a fleet of automobiles valued at $3 million, and a yacht valued at tens of millions of dollars, all while declaring bankruptcy and pretending to have nothing. Anil refuted rumors that he was the owner of this opulent vessel, stating that it belonged to a business and was therefore not included in his personal fortune. Of course, that didn't take into consideration all of his other, astronomically valuable possessions. In actuality, although his bank account and wallet seemed to be empty in terms of liquid assets, Anil still had a large amount of non-liquid assets. When it comes to ownership, liquid assets are those that can be readily and quickly converted into cash, such as savings account money, but non-liquid assets, such as Anil's luxurious automobile collection, must be sold at the possible cost of significant time and value loss. The court may frequently order the defendant to use their non-liquid assets as a source of payment, in circumstances when they are expected to pay large sums of money. Even though Anil said he had sold all of his jewelry to cover legal costs, he managed to avoid having to sell his $3 million worth of cars or opulent mansion by having his lawyers argue that the assets were actually owned by others, and that he was not the rightful owner. There were rumors in 2021 that Anil had millions of dollars stashed away in foreign accounts, so there's a good chance that there is more to his purportedly empty coffers than meets the eye. The judge also disputed that Anil undoubtedly had the choice to receive more financial support from his older brother throughout the fight against the Chinese banks. In response, Anil stated that he had been informed that his brother's rescue would not be happening again. Over the years, the Ambani brothers' paths have taken extremely different turns. Mukesh Reliance Industries Limited, valued at an incredible $217 billion, was listed as 155th on the Fortune 500 list of prosperous worldwide companies in 2021. In the financial world, Anil's older brother is still making waves. He has ties to people like Mark Zuckerberg, who has agreed to buy about 10% of Mukesh's mobile phone company, Jio, in 2020. Mukesh is the richest person in India as of early 2022. His net worth is an incredible $92.7 billion. Anil's tale is, at least in his eyes, one of riches to rags, whilst his father's is one of poverty to riches. It's almost comical to consider that Anil was once praised as a business genius after a convoluted web of lawsuits and scandals. Is it possible to have sympathy for a billionaire? Tell me in the comments section below.